And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, tech's biggest titans gather at the White House to discuss the road ahead for U.S. technology, how they hope to find common ground despite the growing divide between Washington and Silicon Valley. Plus, Sheryl Sandberg opens up in a Bloomberg exclusive. The Facebook COO gives us her take on small business, big branding, and cashing in off advertising as the Lion Innovation Festival roars back into Cannes. And Blue Apron prepares to go public under the shadow of the Amazon Whole Foods deal. We'll look into how last week's mega merger news could rattle plans and an industry food fight that's starting to get messy. But first, to our lead. Tech executives are currently at the White House for the first meeting of the American Technology Council. Among the attendees, Apple CEO Tim Cook, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, and Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. President Trump's senior advisor, Jared Kushner, is chairing the tech summit. He said earlier that he expects tech giants will help the administration unleash the creativity of the private sector on government challenges.
We began by analyzing and auditing our current infrastructure. It turns out that federal agencies collectively operate 6,100 data centers, the vast majority of which can be consolidated and migrated to the cloud, something a lot of you know a lot about.
We're also expecting President Trump to join the meeting at any moment this hour. For the very latest, we're joined now by Bloomberg's Tolu Olorunnipa from Washington. So, Tolu, what has happened so far? This has now been going on for a few hours.
Yeah, we've seen several technology CEOs meeting with some of the top advisors of the president, including the vice president, over at the White House for the last 4 hours. They've been talking about how to modernize government. They've been talking about new ways to bring the expertise of the private sector and try to translate it into government, something that previous administrations have tried to do but has been incredibly difficult, trying to make government more like Apple, more like Amazon, and more responsive to the citizens that it serves. That's what they've been doing for the last few hours. They've also talked about things like the H-1B visa program and some areas of concern that the private sector and the technology CEOs have with what President Trump has done, everything from immigration to climate to the visa issue. So it's been a long and wide-ranging discussion, and it's going to cap with President Trump coming and speaking to some of these CEOs face-to-face.
Now, to clarify, a number of these CEOs haven't actually joined this council. They're today as part of a one-off working session. People like Tim Cook, for example, strongly disagreed with the president on issues like climate change. Is President Trump really going to be receptive to what they have to say?
Yeah, a lot of these CEOs wanted to have a seat at the table. This is not something that they are using as a reason to be a part of the president's council. They're just actually coming to the table to talk to the president and try to have his ear. So it doesn't cost them very much to come and try to get the president to move towards their position on a number of different issues. But there are some CEOs, including Tesla CEO Elon Musk, who decided not to participate in the president's council because of disagreements over things like climate change. But some of the CEOs who were present today want to have the president's ear. They want to show that they have an open mind towards meeting with the president, and a lot of them were saying that they were grateful to have the opportunity to talk to people like Jared Kushner, who has the trust of the president and who may be a little bit more open towards their positions on things like climate change.
All right, Bloomberg's Tolu Olorunnipa there in D.C. Thanks so much for that update as we wait for President Trump. After this meeting concludes, what does it mean for the relationship between tech and Washington? What are some top priorities on the agenda today? To break it all down, Bloomberg Tech's Alex Webb joins us now. So a strong showing for a group of leaders, many of whom were quite vocal in their opposition to President Trump during the election.
Yes, but as Tolu kind of raised that, it is important for them to have a dialogue with the president. There are issues which are very important for their businesses. Of course, for some, it's the immigration question. For others, namely Apple, of course, the offshore cash holdings and their ability to repatriate that money at a lower tax rate is especially important. So they've got to make sure that they have the presidency if and when they want it, and in the hope perhaps that when these issues come to the table, they can help steer it in an amenable direction for their business.
Now, Tim Cook is there today, the CEO of Apple. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago about why he didn't join a council officially. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I don't find these councils in general and committees to be terribly productive. And but it wasn't about not wanting to advise on something where I thought that we could help or we had a point of view that should be heard. And so I'm doing the latter. I can't imagine a situation where I wouldn't do the latter because I think it's in the best interest of America to do it. And I am first and foremost an American.
So he's there, Alex, today as part of a one-off. Why?
I think for those reasons he just said. He wants to be able to advise on the issues which he thinks are important. Now, of course, we mentioned repatriation, but there are any other number of issues. It's quite interesting, the agenda today for what they were discussing, it wasn't actually so much to do with tech policy as such, as how the decisions made in government will affect the way that companies run. It's really the other way around, how tech companies can help government function. A lot of really granular things like cloud computing and access to databases for the public, those kind of ideas. Now, perhaps if you look at it, do you really need top CEOs coming once a month or 4 times a year, whatever it is, to advise on these issues? That's open to debate. But you can see that he's got a chance to meet Jared Kushner and meet a whole bunch of other top players within the White House administration, and that perhaps then serves them going forward.
Some of the issues on the top of Tim Cook's agenda today were told Veterans Affairs, human rights, cybersecurity, encryption issues. It's also interesting who's not there at this meeting today.
Right, absolutely, yeah. Mark Zuckerberg is not there, and of course we heard already about Elon Musk. Facebook said that Mark Zuckerberg, or that their executives more broadly had prior engagements, which meant they couldn't make it. There were a lot of other executives clearly who did make it. It was interesting to see who the attendees were. There were people from MasterCard, which perhaps you wouldn't typically think of as being a tech company. Also the CEO of SAP, who, while he's an American, SAP is a German company. So given some of Trump's outspoken comments about Germany, it's interesting that, of course, some of these people were in attendance.
Are we seeing a change, you think, in sort of the approach of these tech CEOs to Washington, despite the vehement opposition initially?
Well, it's interesting. There is a certain dichotomy at the center of this. On the one hand, if you look at social issues and things like immigration, they are very stringently or strictly opposed to what the administration has to do. On the other hand, things like deregulation is something which is in a lot of their interest, and that's not something that the Obama administration was able to deliver on to the extent that perhaps some of these companies might have wished. So what they say in public might differ 100% from they might not have entire correlation between what they say in private to the president and his people.
All right. Alex Webb of Bloomberg Tech, thanks so much for that update. Appreciate it. Now, to a story we are following. The Federal Trade Commission is challenging the proposed merger between fantasy sports websites DraftKings and FanDuel. The FTC says the combined company would control 90% of the paid daily fantasy business, depriving customers of the benefits of direct competition between the two companies. The CEOs of both DraftKings and FanDuel said in a joint statement that they're disappointed by the decision and considering their options. Coming up, our exclusive interview with Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg. You will hear what she had to say about advertising, Facebook's push into video, and its online fight against inappropriate content linked to hate and terrorism. But first, Sandberg talked about the increasing impact of tech on jobs. This is Bloomberg.
Technology is changing the economy. Technology is certainly replacing jobs, and technology can also be used to grow jobs. And it's our responsibility to help small businesses and large businesses all around the world use technology to grow their businesses so that they can grow jobs.
Berlin-based food delivery company Delivery Hero is planning an IPO, valuing the company at nearly $5 billion. The startup is backed by German incubator Rocket Internet, which owns about 35% of the stock. We spoke to Delivery Hero in September and asked about the growing competition.
Amazon will not be as the first leg, it will be the second or third leg. And I think we have the benefit that we can actually be very targeted in what we're doing and specialized in actually delivering food.
And sticking with IPO news, meal kit delivery company Blue Apron said today it's targeting a $3.2 billion valuation in a U.S. offering. The company hopes to sell 30 million shares for $15 to $17 a piece and is scheduled to price its shares next Wednesday, according to data compiled by Bloomberg. This comes after tech giant Amazon aggressively pushed into the grocery sector on Friday with the announcement of its intent to buy Whole Foods. Our Bloomberg editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, joins us now, along with our Bloomberg IPO reporter, Alex Barinka, in New York. Alex, let's start with Blue Apron. The timing, interesting here. A lot has changed in the last few days. What does that mean for Blue Apron?
It's going to be another challenge that they're going to have to justify on this roadshow, which launched today. So this is a company that operates in a space. We know that food delivery is so fueled by competition. It's an expensive space to operate in because so much of the costs do go to marketing. You're always fighting. It's kind of a land grab out there for wallet share for customers. This is especially tricky for Blue Apron in that Whole Foods will now potentially have the logistical empire that is Amazon, and Amazon customers will have more access to Whole Foods. Why is that important? Because those are the kind of high earner customers, the top 10%, let's say, of U.S. households who are willing to spend a little bit more to get the quality that Whole Foods promises. Well, that kind of happens to be the same group that Blue Apron is targeting. I spoke to an analyst earlier today who said, look, they're all fighting for the same wallet share here of these high spending customers. It's going to be hard for Blue Apron to fight down the value chain because, frankly, folks are just not willing to spend $11, $12 a plate for a box of fresh food, granted, but that might spoil. So when you think about where Blue Apron's growth is going to be, they're going to have to figure out how to make sure that they are the ones nabbing those dollars from those high-end consumers and not Whole Foods via Amazon.
And yet, Corey, Blue Apron, a very different business from Whole Foods, Amazon. How does that really change the competitive landscape?
I mean, look, Whole Foods and Blue Apron are very different businesses. Yes, they serve food to consumers, but that's sort of where the similarities, and a certain type of consumer at a certain price point. What you see Blue Apron doing is trying to market really aggressively, because this is a new kind of idea, sending people just the amount of food that they need to make for a certain meal with that recipe and delivering it on a regular basis. And they're spending vast fortunes to do it. You know, Alex mentioned their marketing costs. They spent $60 million just last quarter, $61 million last quarter. Look how much they're spending every quarter in advertising. And as a percentage of revenues, it's going way up. It was 25% of revenues last quarter. So it's just an extraordinary amount of money to be spending on marketing. That certainly will help them in their IPO because now the name is better known. But they really are just spending like crazy, like drunken sailors, to try to get people into their service. The goal, of course, is not just get them in, but to keep them, and they have yet to show that ability.
Alex, almost every analyst we speak to says to expect more consolidation in this space. Could Blue Apron consider M&A or reconsider the timing?
Well, right now we've got only about 9 days left for M&A to be on the table. This deal is scheduled to price next week, so that would have to happen. I mean, frankly, given where it is in the cycle of this deal, if something like that was going to happen, it probably would have already. What I can tell you is a person familiar with the deal spoke to me and told me that management is focusing on refining its IPO pitch. They're really pushing this lifestyle idea that Corey was talking about, how it's so different, the fact that it's recipes and prepackaged ingredients, and that's so different than what a grocery delivery company does. And they'll be really pushing toward addressable market, not just the fact that they can expand, but also only about 1% of all grocery shopping actually happens online. So these are areas that, you know, frankly, Amazon, Whole Foods could help if people get more used to buying their food off the internet. But this seems to be an IPO for sure at this point, but I will definitely be keeping an eye on it.
Corey, we've got new reporting out that about actually how this Amazon Whole Foods deal will actually work. Job cuts at Whole Foods, price cuts at Whole Foods. What can you tell us?
So Amazon denies the job cuts, but we have other sources saying that that's going to happen. I think, you know, the Amazon style has been to do things at a very, very low margin. Half the margin, as bad as grocery margins are, Whole Foods is about a 5% operating margin. Kroger has about a 2% operating margin. Amazon's even worse. But I think that that's really not, you know, the focus for Amazon in most of its business lines, Amazon Web Services is very different. But Amazon's overall profit margins are below 2%. They want lots of cash flow and use that cash flow to reinvest in their business. So they're not really looking for the very things that Whole Foods activist shareholders are looking for. Increase those operating margins. Don't look for Amazon to do that.
So can Amazon drop the prices sustainably? is the question.
I think they could. I mean, if they're willing to operate at a 2% profit margin, they've certainly shown a willingness to operate at an even lower profit margin going in the past. They could run this business just for the cash flow, use that cash flow to expand all of their businesses. This is a $15 billion a year top line business. The cash flow generates, at the top of my head, about 14% cash flow return. That's a pretty sizable return for them to reinvest that business, and that's the way they seem to look at cash flow. They don't need a lot of profitability. At least the market hasn't punished them for lack of profitability in the past.
What companies could Amazon possibly acquire next?
You know, I don't know. I mean, I think grocery is really hard. And there's a high possibility Amazon could completely screw this up. They've screwed up prior acquisitions in the past. They've opened up a lot of products that they had to shut down in the past. This is a very difficult industry. So the question is, are they going to be very ambitious and do the things that we've been talking about with launching grocery delivery, ordering things online, replacing Instacart when that deal ends with Whole Foods? There's lots of things that they could do with this business, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just stick to their knitting, make Whole Foods work, grow that business and use the cash flow on their balance sheet for all the other things that they want to do, and expand into other areas when the time is right.
All right, well, we will be watching our Bloomberg editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, and our Bloomberg IPO reporter, Alex Barinka. Thank you both. Coming up, our exclusive interview with Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg as she attends the Cannes Lion Festival, the biggest global gathering of the ad community. We'll discuss how businesses can use Facebook products to grow their brands and create jobs in the modern economy. And some news coming from Tesla. The company said to be close to an agreement to produce vehicles in China for the very first time. The agreement is said to be with the city of Shanghai and would allow Tesla to build facilities in one of its development zones. The actual agreement could come as soon as this week. We'll have more details later this hour. This is Bloomberg. ClassPass, the subscription service for fitness classes and gyms, has announced the close of a $70 million Series C funding round led by Temasek. Existing investors, including CRV, General Catalyst, and GV, also participated in the round. According to ClassPass, it's doubled its member base in the last year and has now grown to 35 million reservations to date. Well, global ad executives are convening in Cannes, France this week to talk about how brands can take advantage of new technology. It is all happening at the annual Cannes Lion Innovation Festival. Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg is one of the most anticipated guests and exclusively spoke with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde ahead of her trip. Caroline joins us now from London with more. So, Caroline, what is Sandberg's main message this year?
Emily, yes, thank you. The key message is about the power of the small screen, the power of targeting. She spoke particularly passionately about Facebook and how it can help businesses grow, helping small and big companies just access new customers and build communities around their brands. Take a listen.
What we're seeing is more adoption of the mobile platforms. There are 70 million small businesses that are using Facebook on a monthly basis. That's our free product, and 5 million advertisers. And on Instagram, we have 8 million Instagram business profiles, of which 1 million people are advertisers. And from the very smallest company to the largest company, they're investing in mobile because that's where people are spending their time.
And so do you feel optimistic about what these undercurrents show you about the US economy, about the global economy in general? Are we seeing jobs being created? Are we seeing brands spending money and therefore willing to? Can you give us a gauge as an executive at the top of a business as to what you see out there?
Our goal is to make sure businesses spend money and get a return. So what matters for marketers is when they spend on marketing, it rings the cash register, both online and off. And that's something we're really working on. We also see small businesses playing a very important role in the global economy. The majority of job creation around the world is actually small businesses. And even the most offline small business can use the power of technology. When I was last in Europe, I went to Berlin. I got to visit a company called Holz Connection. They're a furniture manufacturer in Berlin. They're manufacturing wooden furniture, so that is a very traditional business. The son came into the family business and didn't change anything about manufacturing, but started marketing on Facebook and through mobile. And they grew their business, and now they've opened 5 more locations, including outside of Germany, creating jobs and growing their business. And so technology can power innovation both in the core of a business, but also can support any business out there.
And so when people worry about perhaps tech eroding jobs out there. Are you seeing the other point of view?
Technology is changing the economy. Technology is certainly replacing jobs, and technology can also be used to grow jobs. And it's our responsibility to help small businesses and large businesses all around the world use technology to grow their businesses so that they can grow jobs.
And interestingly, when of a current time when we're seeing perhaps drive towards job growth, we're also seeing valuations, for example, of technology companies go through volatile times. Does that ever affect you? Does it affect the way in which you look at the world?
My job every day is to work on growing Facebook, helping more people use Facebook and Instagram and Messenger and WhatsApp. More people get value from the products and services, and more businesses. And I feel like as a business leader, if I focus on our business, that's where my focus needs to stay.
Just the beginning of our exclusive conversation there with Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg. Coming up, you'll hear more of her take on the ad market and what the company is doing to combat terrorism activity on their sites. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Jessica Summers in New York, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. The family of Otto Warmbier, the 22-year-old student sent back from North Korea last week in a coma, says he has died. Warmbier spent a year and a half in prison after ripping down a propaganda sign in North Korea. Doctors said he returned with severe brain damage, but haven't said what triggered it. President Donald Trump reacted to the news a few moments ago, calling North Korea a brutal regime, and at least Warmbier was able to get home to his parents. In Paris, French police have removed the body of the man accused of ramming a car carrying explosives into a police van on the famed Champs-Élysées. France's anti-terrorism prosecutor has opened an investigation. No officers or people on the busy tourist street were hurt. And talks kicked off in Brussels today to officially mark the beginning of the end of Britain's membership in the EU. After the first round of talks, lead British negotiator David Davis said things have gotten off to, quote, a promising start. He says the priority is to reassure UK citizens who live in the EU and people from the EU who are in Britain. And 3 days after President Trump signed his new Cuba policy, the communist island nation is responding. Cuba's foreign minister is rejecting the president's new rules. He said Cuba, quote, will never negotiate under pressure or under threat. He also said American fugitives who have received asylum in Cuba will not be returned to the U.S. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Jessica Summers. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. here in New York, 7:30 Tuesday morning in Sydney. I'm joined by Bloomberg's Paul Allen with a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Jessica. Well, it's looking like a bright day across the Asia Pacific. We've got Nikkei futures pointing higher on the back of that decent lead from Wall Street. And later on, we'll have convenience stores and supermarket sales figures for May out of Japan. ASX futures looking positive here as well, even though it's just by 8 points. And we'll be keeping an eye on the so-called Big Four banks this morning. This is after Moody's downgraded all four of them from AA2 to AA3. This is over concerns over what's been happening in the housing market here in Australia, surging house prices, rising household debt and weak wages growth among the reasons given by Moody's. Now, if those themes sound familiar, that's because they are. We'll be expecting to hear them from the Reserve Bank of Australia later today as well, when the minutes from the June meeting get released. Of course, the cash rate held at that record low 1.5% at that meeting, but chances of a further cut are receding. Other stuff to look out for, the PBOC governor is going to be speaking in Shanghai, so watch out for that. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg takes the stage at the annual Cannes Lion Ad Festival this week as the social network increasingly dominates the multi-billion-dollar global ad market, along with Google. Sandberg spoke exclusively with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde ahead of her trip to France. Caroline, tell us what she had to say about the evolution of Facebook's ad strategy as the market shifts.
Yeah, Emily, well, the focus is still mobile. It's unrelenting at Facebook. And as they see this shift towards the mobile, they want the content created by the advertising community to be made, well, for that medium. Don't try and repurpose a TV ad. Make it for the mobile. And we spoke about the sheer amount of time people are now addicted to their phones and the opportunities that this actually gives across the Facebook products, Emily.
Our biggest message is that the small screen is big. People have moved to mobile and businesses are catching up. It's now the case that the average U.S. consumer, and these numbers are duplicated all over the world, is spending about 4 hours a day on TV and 5 3/4 on digital, the majority of which is mobile. And so it's a really exciting time to be a marketer, because people are carrying around in their pockets this device that lets you reach them all of the time. And brands, products, services, they've always been part of our daily life, from the toothpaste we brush our teeth with to the shampoo we use to the car services or the cars we drive. All of this is part of our daily lives. But now marketers can reach us, hopefully, with messages we want to hear as part of our daily experience. That's pretty amazing. And the explosion of creativity, the Cannes Advertising Festival, is very much about the creative community. It's about how do we create messages that really resonate with people and that want them to be part of their daily lives.
And this is almost playing into a discussion that Mark Zuckerberg himself started this year of community building. That's offline and online. But how are brands going to be able to play into that?
Well, communities are so important, and we're very focused on Facebook, from Mark and all of us, on how we build communities that provide support for people offline and online. Brands are a huge part of that. Airbnb is doing a great job. They have this great offline experience where people can rent house from hosts, but then they've created lots of Facebook groups that create online experiences. So even when you're not on that trip or not on that vacation, you can be connected to the people who are part of it.
And what about all the various products, therefore? I mean, you talk about how Airbnb is making a good run of it at the moment using Facebook groups, but what about Messenger? What about WhatsApp? What about Instagram? The portfolio that you have, how are these products being adopted and the growth you're seeing?
People are using all of these different platforms. In Facebook and Instagram, we have the 2 largest mobile ad platforms in the world, and we're seeing people really use that to build their businesses. There's a young woman in Brazil named Joanna. She started a company called Loja Namo, and their idea was to sell fashion accessories. So using Facebook and Instagram, they were able to, she did all of her advertising herself on her phone, and she was able to target those ads to people interested in fashion accessories, and 79% of the business she had came from Instagram. That's the small and local example. We also see the largest ad agencies, the largest clients in the world, figuring out how to reach people and create creative that work for Facebook, for Instagram. And we're starting to learn a little bit more about how businesses can interact on Messenger as well.
And what about video? This has, of course, been where the real explosion has been and what Facebook has really driven forward. You're experimenting with new ways in which adverts can come within videos that run on Facebook. How is that being adopted, and how much are you starting to see that add to your bottom line?
Marketers have always loved video because it's such a great way to tell a compelling story. And I think what this community is increasingly understanding, and we need to do better, is that you have to create the video for the platform. So the first TV ads were people reading their radio ads behind mics. Now, people could see, but when TV evolved, video ads were made for TV, and it certainly wasn't someone sitting behind a mic. Similarly, a lot of the first video ads in a social space were 30-second TV spots, just moved over to the social platform, and those can work well.
And therefore, is it an either-or when you think of brands putting their money to work? I'm looking at data that says, what, $70 billion is currently spent on TV. How much of that will go purely to the digital space now?
I don't think it's either or. Marketers should reach people on TV, they should reach people on mobile, they should reach people in the digital space, they should reach people everywhere they go. But how they reach people on all those different platforms needs to evolve. And Facebook and Instagram, we think we offer a really unique value proposition for marketers and people, because you can have the creativity of a video, the creativity of sound and light and pictures, but you can also do very specific targeting. You can target your current customers differently than new customers, people who are in the market for a car, people who look like people in the market for a car, so you can make sure the right message gets to the right person.
Caroline Hyde still with us from London now. Caroline, our Bloomberg colleague Sarah Fryer has a new story out about Facebook's push into original content. Is it all about snagging more TV ad dollars in particular?
It was interesting because there it seemed as though Sheryl Sandberg was saying, look, it's not an either or. Keep on putting money into television, but also you've got to now put perhaps more, if not even more excessive amounts than TV into mobile and make it bespoke for us. We were citing there a figure of what, $70 billion is how much is spent on television advertising. I wanted to try to draw out of her whether she thought that will in some way move to digital, because was it 2016 was the first year we saw digital ad spend overtake television ad spend. But for now, it seems as though they're certainly trying to play catch up with YouTube. They're certainly trying to push the online content of a mode of television for a certain extent. Certainly video is where it's at. But it seems as though they're not trying to just pull it away from TV. Sheryl Sandberg seems to think, look, you're going to do both, but certainly keep on the money plowing in with us. And all these new ways and means of getting the share of revenue with these sorts of companies, some of them getting a bit exhausted by the process. But interestingly, you know, you have your video roll out, an advert plays halfway through. Facebook takes some of that money, but it also gives it to the content provider as well.
All right, Caroline Hyde in London. We will have more of your exclusive conversation with Facebook's COO Sheryl Sandberg coming up. Her thoughts on combating terror online and solving tech's diversity problem. This is Bloomberg. Alphabet's Google is also ramping up its efforts to suppress terrorism-related videos. Google says it will increase the use of technology to identify extremist and terrorism-related video across its sites, which include YouTube, and will boost the number of people who screen for terrorism-related content. It's a response to UK lawmakers who've said the internet is a petri dish for radical ideology. Social media and search sites are facing pressure to quickly remove posts by terrorist groups. This after 7 people were killed and 48 injured in an attack in London earlier this month. Now, another tech giant that's been under pressure from the government to combat extremists is, of course, Facebook. The platform recently announced it would increase its use of artificial intelligence to help remove inappropriate content. We're now going to send it back to Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde in London. And Caroline, you spoke to Sheryl Sandberg about this. What did she have to say?
Yeah, fascinating discussion with her. And in my exclusive sit down with Facebook's COO, we discussed what is inherently an incredibly complex issue. We discussed it at length, and I asked her about, well, how the company is tackling these extremist posts and how they are working actually alongside governments to counter the hate speech. Take a listen.
There's no place for any of this content on Facebook, no place for hate, no place for violence, no place for terrorism, and we take that responsibility very seriously. We just announced last week, we've been working on this for a long time, we're going to continue to work on it, but we announced some really important next steps we're taking. We're using AI as a technology to help us find any content that may be inappropriate and get it off even faster. We're making a big human resource investment. We already have researchers and law enforcement experts and terrorism experts who work at Facebook, but we're growing that, as well as our human review capacity. We have about 4,500 people around the world who review content to remove inappropriate content, and we're growing that by 3,000, so that's a very significant investment. We're also working with nonprofits, governments, other companies around the world to make sure that we all work together to make sure that this content, is not on our platforms. For brands, we offer a lot of tools for brands to know where their ads can show, to make sure that they know that Facebook is a safe community for them.
You say that you're working with not-for-profits, with governments. How have you, perhaps in Europe, for example, been talking with governments? Have you had to about this as yet? Are you worried about the talk about encryption and some of the fines that have been raised?
We're in constant conversation with governments on issues of security and issues that affect all of us working together. We've worked with governments to talk about initiatives we called the OCCI, so online content initiatives, where governments can not just make sure terrorism is prevented, but can actually do counterterrorism work, try to get positive messages out there that stop people from doing things that obviously hurt so many people. We also work with law enforcement officials all over the world to make sure that if there's anything we can do to support their work, we're able to do it in this area.
That was something fascinating that you launched in Berlin. It was the Online Civil Courage Initiative, an innovative use of using counter-narrative. This is so complex, as I mentioned, and therefore, how do you think you can understand if you are improving? What's the end goal or target? Is it to ensure that the measurements come down and the numbers come down? What will you count as success, dare I ask?
Well, success from a company point of view is to make sure there is no inappropriate content of any kind. Hate, violence, terrorism, any of this on our platform. But we take our responsibility even more broadly than that. We want to contribute. So, for example, over the past several years, tech companies have started working together, sharing information very freely. When anyone identifies someone they think is going to put inappropriate content on a platform, we know that we have a broad responsibility here to do everything we can in the face of some of these threats to help protect people, and we take that very seriously.
And have brands so far, even though, of course, we're in early days, have brands responded positively, not only on the terrorism element, but also the fake news? They feel that this is changing?
Yes, brands know that Facebook's a safe place for them to be. We've worked very hard to make sure that inappropriate content's not on Facebook and that brands have a safe way and a contextually safe way to communicate on Facebook.
I think what's also fascinating, you talk very passionately about this element. You also have been someone who talks constantly, passionately about diversity. And this is something that we're seeing now brands also become potentially involved in. What are your messages to brands as to how to keep on drawing diversity and ensure we have a balanced view, not only within companies, but also in advertising?
Brands have such an important role to play here because people see so many marketing messages. The estimates are that people can see hundreds of marketing messages a day. That means that if we market products and services so in a supportive of gender equality way, supporting female leadership, supporting men as caregivers, we can really make strides towards gender equality in the world. The Cannes Lion Foundation will announce the Glass Lion, and that's something we worked with them, my foundation, Lean In, to establish a few years ago, and it's an award given every year at Cannes to the ads of the year which are best for gender equality. Last year, P&G won for an ad called Share the Load, which showed a man watching his daughter doing all the housework in her home, realizing he never helped his wife, her mother, and leaving her house and going home to his wife of many decades and offering to do laundry.
And diversity closer to home then. Talk to us about diversity in Silicon Valley. If I'm a female looking at getting a job in technology at the moment, I look at one big brand, I look at Uber, for example, and maybe I'm being put off. What advice as a COO might you give to Uber, and what advice would you give to those people wanting to get into technology right now as a female?
Well, obviously, the reports of what's happening at Uber are super troubling, and I'm glad that they are taking action to address them, and all of us need to do more. We definitely need more women and underrepresented minorities in the tech field. We also need them in leadership in every industry in the world. We have these same issues. In technology, we have a special both concern and opportunity, which is that women are not studying computer science. In 1985, women were 35% of computer science degrees, and now we're down to 17 or 18%. But we know that girls are outperforming boys in school in most countries in the world, including yours, including mine, all the way from elementary school through university. And so we need to persuade our daughters and people of underrepresented minorities that tech is for them, so that we can make sure our industry over the long run can represent the diversity of the people we serve.
Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg there with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde. Caroline, thanks so much for that interview from London. You can watch the full interview at Bloomberg.com. We're getting headlines now from that tech summit in Washington that we told you about earlier. President Trump has spoken with the executives in the last hour. Apple CEO Tim Cook has made some remarks saying the U.S. should have the most modern government in the world. We're going to continue to monitor this meeting for any headlines and bring you as we have them. This is Bloomberg. We've got some developing news now on Tesla. The electric car maker said to be close to an agreement to produce vehicles in China for the first time. The move would allow the company to avoid an import tax and price its cars more competitively in the world's largest auto market. This according to people familiar with the matter. Joining us now to discuss our Bloomberg Tech reporter Dana Hull, who covers Tesla. What do we know so far?
Well, it sounds like there's an imminent announcement for Tesla to produce vehicles in Shanghai, and we're hearing this from China. Not a lot of details yet on who the JV partner would be, but this would be a huge move for Tesla as it seeks to become a global automaker. Right now, they just have one auto plant here in California.
So how significant is this?
It's pretty significant because right now American auto companies can't really make cars in China unless they have a local production partner, and without that, the import taxes are prohibitively high. And having a local partner in China to produce with would allow Tesla to access China, where luxury cars are all the rage.
How big a market do we think China could be for Tesla?
It could be pretty significant. We're already seeing signs that sales of the Model X are doing really well there. You know, they came out with the X with this HEPA filter for climate control, and in the wake of the Paris Agreement, China is the leader on climate change, especially when it comes to autos.
Elon Musk tweeted over the weekend also that there are 2 upcoming SpaceX launches. What can you tell us about those?
Yes. So their next launch is BulgariaSat, which is a communications satellite. That launch has shifted around a little bit, but is now scheduled for Friday from Cape Canaveral in Florida. Then on Saturday, they're going to launch satellites for Iridium from Vandenberg Air Force Base. So they could potentially have 2 back-to-back launches from either coast.
What is the significance of these coming launches given the challenges that SpaceX has had?
I think what you're really seeing is that SpaceX has kind of come back from the mishap of last September, and they're launching rockets on a more regular basis. Their goal is to launch 20 to 24 rockets this year, and if they hit that, that would be a pretty incredible launch cadence.
So talk to us about then what we're expecting.
Well, we're just expecting 2 launches. I mean, launches can shift a lot because of last-minute technical issues or because of weather. They have to get permission from the Air Force. But if they launch 1 rocket from Florida on Friday and then another rocket from California on Saturday, that's pretty unprecedented.
So put it in the big picture for us when it comes to the space race, the private space race, as it were, and SpaceX's role within it.
Well, SpaceX is really focused on driving down the cost of space, and reusing rockets is a big part of that. So they had a big milestone in March where they reused a rocket for the first time. They're going to reuse one of the rockets again this weekend, and they're just going to be launching rockets on a more regular basis. The more they launch, the cheaper it gets as they reuse their boosters.
All right, well, we'll look forward to those this weekend. Dana Hull, who covers Tesla and SpaceX for us. Thanks so much, Dana.
My pleasure.
For joining us. Speaking of, for this edition of Out of This World, NASA has found new evidence of 219 planets outside our solar system, and with 10 of those planets appearing to be similar to the size of Earth. The planets orbit their stars in what's known as the Goldilocks zone, just far enough away to develop water, but not so far that they freeze. With the addition of this latest release, Kepler has now identified over 4,000 planet candidates. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tomorrow we will hear from Tableau CEO Adam Selipsky discussing the growth of their software business in Europe. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That is all for now. This is Bloomberg.